Okay, so welcome everyone. Our webinar today is obtaining free accessible digital books for eligible Florida K through 12 students. My name is Liz Anderson. I am the supervisor of the Florida Instructional Materials Center for the Visually Impaired. And joining us today, we have Dr. Marta Luz Pozo with Learning Ally. She goes by Marta. And then we have Amanda Landavazo with Benetech. She will be sharing information about Bookshare today. Please, as I said, use your chat as we're presenting. We might hold questions till the end to see how things are going in case there's something that comes up where your question gets answered, because there will be a lot of information being shared today. We do have handouts available for this, all of the slides, as well as some resources from Learning Ally and Bookshare. I'm going to grab that link and put it in the chat if I can get it to cooperate with me. So that link there is where you can find everything, and this is on our website right now as well. One of my FIMC folks might be able to help me out with that. And as I said, we are recording, so the recording for this will be posted on the past events page of the FIMC-VI website within a week, along with the handouts that I just shared. And I see a hand is raised. Natalia? Do you need assistance? Let me give you the mic. Oh, hand went down. Okay. Maybe not. I think sometimes Zoom is fancy and it recognizes hand gestures. Okay. All right. So our agenda today, we are doing our welcome and introductions. We're going to do an overview of digital text. So I will be sharing just about eligibility, the services that are available. Learning Ally will be sharing, and then we have Bookshare, and then any follow-up questions that are still left. And we do have a very brief evaluation for you to complete, and we plan to be done by 3:30 today. So our objectives today are that you will learn about which students are eligible for digital books from Bookshare and Learning Ally, who is determining eligibility, and what the National Instructional Materials Accessibility Standard or NIMAS files are, and which students are eligible. This is just some of what we intend for you to learn today. You're going to be learning even more from Learning Ally and Bookshare. We are offering in-service and or ACVREP credit for those of you in the visual impairment field. So with that, you're going to want an opening code that I will give you in a moment. And at the very end of the webinar, I will explain how you can get that certificate to present to your district for credit if you are looking for that. Your opening code for this webinar is access. And before we get into the digital text portion of the webinar, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of FIMC-VI. So we are a statewide resource center for K-12 students who are visually impaired and enrolled in, slide jumped, a public school, private school, being homeschooled, charter school. We are located in Hillsborough County Public Schools, and we're a discretionary project that's maintained by the Florida Department of Education, Bureau of Exceptional Education, and Student Services. And then our vision statement is we are striving for access and success at the highest levels for all students with visual impairments. And our mission is to promote the success of Florida students with visual impairment by providing free, high quality, accessible instructional materials in a timely manner, and providing training such as this to all of the folks that are working with our students. Now, while we are a center that provides services related to students with visual impairments, this webinar is not just for those students. This webinar applies to students that are outside of that category that also qualify for Bookshare and Learning Ally. So don't let that deter you. Okay, so before I get into my portion of the webinar, I would just like you to type in the chat, what are some situations where a student may need a digital version of a book rather than just using the physical print book, or if they have a visual impairment using hard copy braille or large print. For those students with disabilities, why might they need that digital version? And then with that, where are you getting those digital materials from? Just to kind of see where you all are with using digital materials for your students. The fingers are warming up there. People might, I wish I had like on my iPhone where I can see when people are typing. That would be a great feature. Okay, the student has physical access needs, so maybe they can't physically manipulate a book. That could be one reason that they need a digital version of a book. FIMC-VI and APH. So that's an answer to the question, where do you get the digital material? Bookshare, yay, they're here. They have a need for a leveled reader. That's a great point. Hey, Jennifer, when it is a large passage or the passages are in multiple books, it's much easier to get info rather than rather than flipping through more than one passage or book. If they need masking of text. For students who are learning English. So there's a whole variety of reasons that we might have that a student would benefit from a digital version of a book as opposed to the physical version. Being able to adjust spacing, contrast, and all kinds of stuff. Okay, wonderful. All right. So here's what I said. A student might need an accessible digital book if the online book is from the publisher is not accessible to a student with a disability. I think we have all seen that even if it's an online copy of a book, it might just be a PDF. So there's no way to adjust the text. There's no way to use a screen reader or anything like that with the text. So it's really not accessible, even though it's digital. Or it might be that it's a print book that's being used in the classroom, but the student, as somebody said, they have difficulty manipulating those materials, or they might need the material in an auditory format. So they have the print book, but they need that digital format instead for a variety of features and reasons. Okay, and so what are the primary sources for accessible digital books? Hooray, like I said, they're here. So Learning Ally is a discretionary project of the Florida Department of Education, Listening Through Learning, and they have human narrated books that are audio only or voice text that are available for free. Free for Florida districts, everyone who's in Florida. And it does include a library curation capability to support districts and schools in adhering to legislation. And then Bookshare is the world's largest online library of accessible ebooks for people with reading barriers. It is also free for US schools and qualified students. And so before I continue after this slide, type in the chat whether you think the following is true or false. If there is a student who has been identified as being deaf or hard of hearing, but they do not have a reading deficit, they can use Bookshare and Learning Ally. Do you think that is true or false? A student is deaf or hard of hearing, but they do not have a reading deficit. That means that they can use Bookshare and Learning Ally. Okay, we have some trues here. I have no idea, and that's okay. Okay, we have a false. All right. I'm not going to give you the answer yet. We're going to go through and then we'll figure out what the answer is. Yes, it's good to be honest. It's okay to not know. All right. So which students are eligible for Learning Ally and Bookshare? And the links that are in the title of this slide do go to the pages on these two organizations' websites that give you more information about their eligibility. But we have some language here that does come from existing law in the United States. And it says, students who have been certified by a competent authority as being an individual who is blind, has a visual impairment or perceptual or reading disability that cannot be improved to give visual function substantially equivalent to that of a person who has no such impairment or disability and is so unable to read printed words to substantially the same degree as a person without an impairment or disability. Or the third option is students who are otherwise unable through physical disability to hold or manipulate a book or to focus on or move the eyes to the extent that would be normally acceptable for reading. So right there, that just tells you not all students who have a disability are eligible for Learning Ally and Bookshare. The language, like I said, this comes from the Marrakesh Treaty, which is the most recent thing that has kind of happened in law that affects copyright law, and that language has been adopted by the National Library Service. So looking at all this, have any of you changed your mind about the question that I asked? If a student is only deaf or hard of hearing, has no reading deficit, can they use Learning Ally and Bookshare? Okay, so now I see a false, and I think that was a true before, and now Andrea is saying emphatically no, exclamation point. You all are correct. So if it's a student, say they're deaf or hard of hearing or autism spectrum disorder, a disability where they're not meeting one of these three criteria that we just saw, then they do not qualify for Bookshare or Learning Ally. Okay. This next slide is just a little bit of clarification about that reading disability, reading deficiency criteria, specifically for Florida. There is our Rule 6A-6.053 that relates to substantial reading deficiencies. So if you really want to dig into that, we have that rule for K through 3, and this rule does provide the criteria for districts K through 12 comprehensive evidence-based reading plan. So each district is responsible for determining the criteria for a substantial reading deficiency for students in grades 4 through 12. So that part of the eligibility, that's at the district level where you're determining who's meeting that criteria. And then of course on the student's IEP or their 504 plan. Okay, so in the language that I read about eligibility, it talked about a competent authority saying that they have determined a student is one of these criteria. So who is a competent authority? The change that happened with the law related to all of this did expand who fits into that category. So some of the things, and this is not an inclusive list that you see on this slide. So a doctor of medicine, a doctor of osteopathy, an ophthalmologist, optometrist, psychologist, registered nurse, therapist. And then this is the one that's really broadening things here. Professional staff of hospitals, institutions, and public or welfare agencies. Schools are a public welfare agency, essentially, right? So that means that the people that are working in a place like that can be a competent authority. In the past, only a medical doctor could certify that an individual had a reading disability, that they met that criteria. So now any of these people can do this. So that public welfare organization, so that means educators, social workers, caseworkers, counselors, rehab teachers, school psychologists, lots of different people who can do this. The librarian in the school. Bookshare, on their site, they do have an even more expansive list of who might be a competent authority. But again, like I said, it's not all inclusive. And then I do want to go to Learning Ally here. So Marta, you might have to correct me on this, but you had mentioned that they need to check with their administrator at their school to see who had been granted that competent authority access. Did I interpret that right?
So our recommendation is to always check with your school administrator, because there may be a school administrator that is much more hands-on and would like there to be a sit team meeting and everyone to collaborate as they review each student that they're going to mark as eligible. Other school administrators may be less hands-on and may just say, the ESE department is dealing with this, shoot me an email and tell me what's going on. So as a former administrator, I'm always going to say, check with your administrator.
Beautiful. Thank you. And one other thing that I want to say here before I move on, that language that was there, it talked about students being eligible to use accessible format. In the past, the term was specialized format, so that's just new language. And that accessible format is any alternative manner or format that allows a person to have access to a work that is equivalent to a person without a disability. So just so you know that that's what accessible formats is referring to. Okay, and so with all of this, does the student need to have an IEP or 504 plan to access Bookshare and Learning Ally? And the answer is, it depends. There are differences. So if the student does have an IEP and they meet the eligibility criteria that we just looked at, they can access everything on both platforms, Learning Ally and Bookshare. If they don't have an IEP or a 504 plan, they can access everything in Learning Ally. The one exception is that in Bookshare, there are files that are NIMS sourced files, and I'll explain that in the next few slides. So if they don't have an IEP, but otherwise they do have, reading deficiency or visual impairment, then they can still access most of what is in Bookshare. They're just going to be the small segment of materials that are NIMS source files that they will not be able to use. If a student is in the RTI process and is suspected of having a disability, they too can access the files that we're talking about on the right side here, the Learning Ally files and the Bookshare files that are not NIMS sourced. So hopefully that's clear. So now let's talk about what is a NIMS source file, what makes these different. So as I mentioned before, NIMS stands for the National Instructional Materials Accessibility Standard. And this is, when you look at it, it looks like an HTML file. It's just a string of characters that looks like gobbledygook. And that is used to prepare electronic files. And it's used to convert the file into accessible formats. So we at FIMC, we use NIMS files to produce Braille and large print. It's not a file that can be used by the student because, like I said, it just looks like HTML code. The provider of these files is the publisher. Publishers are the ones who have to go out and have the file produced, and then they give that file to the NIMAC, which is the National Instructional Materials Access Center. So back in 2004, the Individuals with Disabilities with Education Act created the National Instructional Materials Access Center. So they're responsible for managing those NIMS files. NIMS files, like I said, they can be made into Braille large print by an organization like FIMC, but if we're talking about digital files, usually you're going to get maybe like a Word file, an EPUB, a DAISY file, and then BRFs, which is a Braille file. The books that are in Bookshare, when you're looking, they're very clearly labeled as to whether it's NIMS sourced or not. So you'll know if the file, if it says NIMS, and I think, and Amanda might know the clarification for this, is if the student, when they're in there, if they're not marked as being NIMS eligible, I don't think they can even see those books, but Amanda, you can correct me if I'm wrong. And there is a change that previously with NIMS files, you could only create those for books that were print. But now if it's a static digital file, so it's digital, but it's not a, an interactive kind of material, those can be created into NIMS files as well. Okay, and because this was created under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, that's why the students have to have an IEP in order to access materials created with them. Okay, hopefully that's clear too. If you have any questions, type them in the chat. All right, and so with all of that, what if you sign up your student, you've determined they're eligible, competent authority, done all that stuff, and they're on there, and then you're looking for a book that the student needs, and it's not there. Well, Learning Ally and Bookshare, they both have ways that you can go about requesting the books. It's just their own system. So with Learning Ally, there is a link in the slide deck here that you can, when you get it, you can go to that link. That's how you follow the directions there to request that a book be recorded. Marta, you can correct me if I'm wrong. There's no guarantee that's going to happen, right? And then you have to check because it doesn't look like there's any notification if that is approved and then the book is recorded.
Correct. There's no notification. We say that there's no guarantee it's going to be done quickly because it comes into the system, and whichever books have more requests, those are the ones that are going to be done first. So, teachers have told me, I'm just going to tell everybody on my staff to send in a request for the same book. So then that way we have a lot more people asking for the same book.
That makes sense. So it's a prioritizing thing. Yes, because you can only do, especially if it's human, that's taking a lot of time to produce those materials. And then on the Bookshare side, if this is a student who is NIMAS eligible, there are specific directions for how to request the book from the NIMAC, because they're going to go out and they're going to see if they have that file. Maybe there needs to be work done with the publisher to get the NIMAS file to then produce material using that. If the student is not NIMAS eligible, there's a separate process to follow. The link in the slide will take you there. But with that, they're not going to use a NIMAS file. They're going to use some other method, which may mean that you're going to have to provide a physical copy of the book. I know like here at FIMC, we will take a book and we cut the binding off and we scan the book. So that means you're not getting the book back, most likely, I would guess, Amanda. I don't know if you know about that part of the process with Bookshare.
Yeah, would love to clarify that a little bit. We will not ask for a physical copy of the book. If you request a book from us and we don't have it, and that book is needed for school for a student as part of our funding from the Department of Education, we are committed to adding any book a student needs for school to the Bookshare library. So if it's not in the NIMAC, as you said here, if it is in the NIMAC, we will reach out to the NIMAC. They'll provide us with the copy of that book to add to Bookshare. If it's not there, or if the student isn't NIMAC eligible, then we actually just purchase the book and it gets shipped off for the process you were just talking about, Liz. That it gets chopped, it gets scanned, proofread, and then uploaded into the library. I will say, because of that process where somebody is physically taking that book and turning it into a digital copy, the lead time on something like that can take a while, especially if it's, say, a math textbook or a physics textbook. Those things are more complicated, take more time than, say, a novel for an English class. So we always say the earlier you can request books, the better. Take a look at your curriculum, for the next semester, check to see if the books are there. And if not, go ahead and submit the requests on the behalf of your students. And then, as it says here, you should be notified when the book is available. The system will ping you once it's up in the library.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. And this is so wonderful about having you both here to make sure the information we're sharing is accurate. So thank you. And I'm assuming too, so like you said about the timeline, if they are looking for a book, they want the Braille ready file, the BRF, that's going to take a while too, even if it's in the NIMAC and they have the NIMAS file, that, like that, all of that takes time. So
yeah, and I don't want to derail you too much here, Liz, so tell me to wait for my turn if you want. But as far as the BRF version goes, because we are talking about just this sheer scale of the Bookshare library, over 1 million books, the BRF files that you're downloading from Bookshare are automated transcribed Braille. So it's not human transcribed Braille that you are downloading in a BRF file. So if there's a book in the Bookshare library, you should be able to download a BRF file from it because it's automatically transcribed Braille. So just to clarify.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's good to know as well. Yeah, so there's no, it's just, going through that conversion process and then there it is. Okay. Wonderful. All right. So we kind of touched on this a little bit already, but just to make sure you have this all in one place. So the formats that are available with Learning Ally, they have their human narrated books with audio only. There's voice text, so that has the text on the screen. And with that, you can change how the text appears. The background color, the font color, highlight, you can speed the text or speed the voice up or slow it down. They have textbooks with the classic audio where you're intended to be using that with a physical textbook. And we did find out that Learning Ally Link, that is compatible with VoiceOver. And so that means that if you have that, then you can use it also on DAISY devices. So like the Bookport and various, this is more for our students who use Braille, but note takers and things like that, like the HumanWare Braille Note. So that's a cool feature too, to be aware of, that you can use those Learning Ally files on those devices. And that's through Learning Ally Link. Is that correct, Marta? Like, so you have that app and you're going through that way.
Yes, I believe, and I can I can put a link to the DAISY information if you like.
Okay, yeah, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Okay, and then on the Bookshare side, we did mention some of those already. We've got the Braille Ready format, the EPUB. So if you're not familiar with that, that's a digital book file format. And that works with many popular large-scale reading applications, including iBooks. And the DAISY, we've mentioned that a few times now. So that stands for Digital Accessible Information System Format. And these files do tend to work with just about every type of accessible technology that's out there that can read text. So screen readers, self-voicing, DAISY players, Braille note takers, portable DAISY players, things like that. And then of course you also just have your Word files, MP3 files, and then there's the Bookshare reader option. And Andrea is excited in the chat. She cannot wait for eBraille. So that is talking about EBRFs, I believe. That's a topic for another day, but that's an exciting thing that's coming too. That will be related to refreshable Braille displays. Okay, thank you, Marta, for putting that in the chat. All right. And so what about those students who have a disability but they don't meet this eligibility criteria? So the reminder is that districts are responsible for providing FAPE-free appropriate public education to our students. And so if the student needs specific accommodations, those are being put on the IEP. One thing to consider is if the student does need a different format, you might need to be looking into additional disability category, doing additional assessment to determine why is the student struggling to access the standard formats that are available. And another option to think about is to reach out, your district instructional materials department can reach out to the publisher to see if there are digital versions of the book available to purchase. Which of course we know with that though, it may not be accessible or something that can be manipulated to make the text bigger and things like that. So that is still ultimately a district responsibility. All right, and so which projects can you contact if you need more information regarding eligible students who need digital text? So especially when you're looking at the assessment process and identifying student needs and technology, things like that. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with Fiddlers. They have their centers across the state and they provide a variety of trainings related to serving students with disabilities. I looked on their website and they had some that are very relevant coming up, including technology to support reading comprehension, introduction to differentiating instruction, and reading difficulty, disabilities, and dyslexia. The Technology and Learning Connection project, which is also a DOE project, they have Passport to Learning. This is a training series that is offered pretty much every semester, and it addresses assistive technology for students with disabilities, as well as resources related. TLT also has resources that are related to assistive technology, curriculum, and instructional materials. And then, of course, we here at FIMC-VI are supporting our students with visual impairments with materials and training. Okay, so I just have some links to some of the resources that were shared. The second bullet here is where the language came from that relates to eligibility. And there are some other resources from Bookshare and Learning Ally in the handout folder that I shared. And with that, I am done. So I'm going to stop sharing and let Marta take over and share about Learning Ally.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I think I need to give you permission to share. There we go. Okay.
All righty. Okay, I'm in. So I'm going to start real quick with a clip for you guys. And please let me know if there are any issues with the volume.
Before Learning Ally, I remember I used to have to take remedial classes in middle school and elementary school. And then after, I think we found them around like 8th grade, high school around, I finally was able to enter the regular English classes. And I felt like I finally was able to succeed in English. It was always, I take like about, I think twice as long to read. Three times as long. But after Learning Ally, I was able to finally suddenly read books. But that just goes to show you the power of Learning Ally and everything involved. So thank you guys very much for what you've done for all of us. Thank you.
So Learning Ally has been around for about 75 years, and that is one young man who has been using Learning Ally and all the different things it has to offer, which we're going to be talking about in a moment. I had my slideshow up, and for some reason it kicked me out. There we go. So good morning. I'm sorry, good afternoon. Wow, the day has gone by very quickly. We're going to be talking about our Learning Ally Learning Through Listening project today. We are similar to Fiddlers in that we are a discretionary project. We always want to start with a reminder that everything that we use here in the state of Florida, we want to make sure that it meets those instructional materials requirements and that it aligns to our Florida standards and benchmarks. So normally you would see myself and my partner in crime, Simone Smith. We are both contract managers for the state of Florida. We kind of split the state. However, we do try to support each other as much as possible. So just because I don't have your district doesn't mean you can't talk to me. If Simone is not available, you are always welcome to communicate with me. Our objective is just to make sure that you get the best assistance that you can as quickly as possible, because we want you to get those kids reading. So I'm going to do my quick little soapbox thing. As a former educator, or I should say as a former classroom teacher and former administrator, because I still feel like I'm an educator, I come to you with a why of being a dyslexic myself. My youngest of my two girls is also a dyslexic. She's also a first grade teacher. And for her, Liz was asking at the beginning, like, what are some reasons why students would need to use alternative books? Well, with her dyslexia, we used to use Audible because she used to suffer from migraines, from focusing too much, and from trying to decode constantly. And she hated reading. Which is ironic because now she loves reading and she teaches reading. So as a mom of a child who struggled with reading, even though everyone else in our family loved reading, and as a former classroom teacher, I'm going to tell you, whether it's Learning Ally or Bookshare, leverage everything you can, because the objective is to get our kids reading. So as we were saying before, Learning Ally has been around for 75 years. And we started because a nurse came back from the war and she realized, wow, all of these young men that I worked with are no longer able to see. They may have some kind of disability that was caused by the war, and now they cannot go into the workforce because they can't retrain. So she started recording herself and she started sending out records old, big, giant vinyl records from the New York Library via snail mail to everybody at their home so that they could listen to magazines or read instructional materials, listen to instructional materials so that they could move on to a different career after they came back from the war. And that just kind of morphed to, well, there are lots of different types of people that may need assistance when it comes to reading, and you can open up a whole world for them. So think of all the times that we maybe when we were younger had experiences of people reading to us. I know with my children, they used to get very upset with their father and say, we don't want you to read because you don't do the voices the way that mommy does. And they were also used to hearing their teachers at school just get excited and do the voices and make everything seem like it was just so amazing versus, just kind of reading through the magazine or reading through the book. So think of all of those things that you're doing. Think of how exciting also for a child, for example, we are Hispanic. So for a child to read Esperanza Rising, and here in Hillsborough County, especially closer to Polk County, we have kids that may have experiences like Esperanza does in the book. So how wonderful for them to have someone that relates to who they are and what their experiences are. And then also not just making the connection to the characters that are in the book, but when I go to lunch and I start talking about this really cool book that I'm reading, whether it's Dog Man or Esperanza Rising, I want to be able to connect with my peers. And that can be a shared experience that a classroom teacher creates through a novel in the room. But if my students can't read that grade level text, they may be left out of those conversations. So the benefits of Read Aloud go much further than just hearing a story. So what exactly is Learning Ally? Well, we are a discretionary fund for human-read books, and we've got over 86,000 copies right now of textbooks that are aligned to the curriculum, literature, popular fiction. And what I really want you to focus on, though, is think about literature and popular fiction that kids are not exposed to. We have so many different textbooks that there may be some textbooks in there that do align, but I know here in the state of Florida, every 5 years, we're moving on to another textbook. So we may not have everything that you need in terms of textbooks, but we really want to make sure we're grabbing these kids with those novels because those novels are aligned to our standards and benchmarks. We've got almost every suggested title from our Florida Best Standards ELA book into the system. So we're really going to be able to support those kids that need the exposure to the vocabulary that we have in those standards. And we do have library management capabilities as well at a district level. It can be done at a school level. You can go in and do grade ranges. You can also do age-appropriate filters. So that'll help you with requirements for HB 1467 as well as HB 1069. And it just kind of sets up the guardrails that we need here in our state to ensure that we are exposing students to what they should be exposed to. And at the same time, we're still going to be supporting that best practice of self-selection. Here in the state of Florida, we really do believe in parental choice, and we want those parents who do not want a student to read something to be able to say, I don't want my student to read it. But we also want those parents who do want their student to read something to be able to say, I would like my student to read it. Being able to put in those library management capabilities gives us those parameters and still allows for that parental choice. And as I said before, also for that self-selection of reading materials, which is best practice. You can modify the audio, the visual. You have text highlighting by the sentence that you can follow along with. And once the student has the app, they can actually download the app onto their phone. They would enter either through the web page if your district is not integrated. If your district is integrated, whether ClassLink or Clever, they would go in through their district portal, log in through their Clever or ClassLink, get the app that way, download it, and then they can download a book. Once a book has been downloaded onto the device, you do not need Wi-Fi or internet to read it. So as a classroom teacher, if you're a gen ed teacher that's trying to create a differentiated classroom and at the same time have your students mainstreamed, you can do a novel, have it pre-downloaded onto your device. So if anything comes up where our internet is down, we can't use this, you as the classroom teacher will still have access. Your students on their apps will still have access. Kids riding the bus, kids at home that don't have internet access, they will still be able to read. Who is eligible? As Liz was saying, there are resources that you can look at, and I'm going to share one in a moment that talks about eligibility. But here in the state of Florida, we want to remember that it's Florida public and public charter school students. For your parentally placed private school students, you really need to refer to your LEA. You want to make sure that if a student has a reading deficit, if they are blind, visually impaired, or if they have some kind of orthopedic impairment, they have access. And these are school-based decisions, but I will always recommend that you discuss this first with your school administrator. So when we talk about reading deficits, and that is on one of the resource documents that we have available for you guys. By the way, this Florida resource document has PDFs and little mini videos. Each video is less than 2 minutes long because we know that you really don't have a 45-minute planning period. You've got about 15 minutes to get something done. So all of these videos are only going to be about 2 minutes. You can watch it, do what you have to do, and then go get that lunchbox and the mail and everything else we have to do in those 45 minutes. When you're in here, we have links to our eligibility guide, and it really breaks it down a little bit further for you. And there is a link to that Rule 6A 6.053 that Liz mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. And basically, we are going to encourage you to look at your SERP data. So if you have looked at your SERP, you realize that anybody who's a level 1, and that would be for like 4 through 12, anybody who's a level 1 needs that immediate resource. Those would be kids you definitely want to put on here. If you're looking at level 2s, you may want to put them on here as well. And that has been a conversation we've had with our liaison, and she too at the FLDOE encourages all level 1s and level 2s to leverage the use of Learning Ally. We're also going to look at the criteria for those students that are in K through 3. And on top of that, you also want to talk to your district leaders, because we have some school districts that'll say, yes, anybody who on the FAST has a 1 or a 2 is going to be eligible for this. You'll have other districts that may say, well, our rule is anybody that is 2 years below grade level. Those are the kids that have a reading deficit or a reading deficiency. So please make sure that you are having those communications so that you can ensure that you're giving access to any student who really needs the access. When you're thinking about your MTSS and RTI process, think about those kids that are not yet, have not yet gone through the process. You know, maybe I just got Jonathan for the first time this year and it's only September, and I know he's really smart, but for some reason, whenever I ask him questions about what he read, he doesn't really understand what's going on. So I'm asking last year's teacher, and she's telling me, yeah, we started the RTI process, you know, but we never, you know, were able to finish it. There were all these things that, you know, happened because it was at the very end of the year. So now you can get some baseline data by giving the student something to read independently and asking some questions, and then having them read that same book in Learning Ally, and then asking comprehension questions. You can get that data that gives you a little bit of insight into what may be going on with Jonathan. So we are talking about all the different times that we read when we are in a classroom. Think about that independent reading. Think about the whole group, the small group. So as a classroom teacher, a lot of the different things that are going on in my classroom during the day may have me, you know, promote the independent reading for the kids. How many times are we not standing in a classroom? Somebody comes to the door. Okay, take out a book. You're going to be reading this. And then I have to stand at the door and have that conversation because there was an emergency. So all of those little times during the day really do add up. And there are moments that we can get our kids to be exposed to vocabulary and to be exposed to more materials. So all those little times are going to be times that I may tell them, yes, you can take out that Learning Ally book. When you are doing whole group instruction, as I alluded to a couple of minutes ago, I would create a really inclusive classroom by showing the novel on my screen at the front of the room. I would take Jonathan and sit him closest to the speakers. I'm still differentiating his instruction because he's the one that really needs to hear it. But the entire class has this up on the screen. So at the same time, I'm not standing in the front of the classroom reading this to my kids or trying to walk around the room and reading to them at the same time while I have to tell Jonathan to stop doing that and that we're on page 5. I can now do my best practice of walking around and doing check-ins with the kids because the screen is showing Learning Ally. And that's because the teacher has his or her own bookshelf and because I have a student that is eligible in my classroom. So now when Jonathan goes to his reading coach or when Jonathan goes to the VE teacher to get that extra support, I'm not handing him or her the book and saying, hey, read chapter 1 with Jonathan. Instead, I'm saying, hey, we all read chapter 1 together. Can you please go over the vocabulary that he had issues with? Can you discuss comprehension questions with Jonathan? Oh, by the way, these are the skills that I noticed he's really weak in. Maybe you can work on those skills for the 45 minutes you've got him. So those are all ways of really almost like doubling your time for those different skills that our kids need when we have them in the classroom, especially because we have so many other priorities that are pushing us in many different directions. We talked a little bit about library management. I just wanted you to see kind of what it looks like. And this does occur across the district when we put it in. And the reason why we have that set up that way is because if it is a problem at my particular school, it may be a problem at the school down the street in the same district. So it kind of just covers all of us. What I will see as a teacher is a little sign that pops up that tells me that a book has been hidden or that a book needs permission to be pushed out to the students. Do we have any questions so far? Is there anything that you guys would like to know about? I know I've been talking really fast and a lot, but if there's anything you'd like to know, I'm happy to respond. So we've got Clever and ClassLink. We do integrations. The great thing about doing the integration, and Hillsborough County just finished their integration, is the fact that now all the students are in there. Does that mean every single student can use the program? No, it does not. What it means is, as the teacher, I don't have to type in the student's name. I find my student, I click eligibility, I choose what eligibility my student needs, and I give them permission to use the app. So if a student does not have eligibility, they're just going to get a little sign that says, oops, you need to ask your teacher about this. But really and truly, if you can get your school district to go through the integration, it makes it so much easier for our classroom teachers. We also have the app that is downloadable onto your phone. I have my app. I love to use it when I am driving across the state of Florida, just trying to go to different conferences or working with different school districts. And it gives us the ability to listen to that book anywhere we are without Wi-Fi. So here is an example that we have of Esperanza Rising. As you can see on the right-hand side, we've got our Florida best standards. So it is now February, unbelievably enough, because it's gone by really quick, which means EOC and FAST assessments are just around the corner. Think of all the standards and benchmarks that you have already done, and then think of which ones you may not be able to get to. A novel would be a great way to start touching on those standards and benchmarks. In our ELA book, which we can send you a PDF of. There's a link usually that the FLDOE has for everybody that you can use to access that book. The titles are in there, and it'll show you a standards and benchmark page by grade level, which will tell you which standards and which benchmarks the book that you would like to read will cover. So it's like a great little guide to help you remember which standards and benchmarks to support. So we're going to go into Esperanza Rising. This is going to be a little example of what the students are going to get to see when they're in the book. And this can also be done by the classroom teacher. So you can go to the bottom right where the gears are, and you can make selections on playback. You can change text. Before I hit play, I'm going to point out that there are 2 words here that are highlighted. That's because I've gone through and I've double clicked on the word to find the definition, and I've written myself a little note. So the video goes kind of fast, so I just kind of wanted to set it up for you guys. Also notice what the character sounds like. So we've created more white space. We're really changing the look so that there's more contrast. We can even change the color of highlight.
Los aguacates, avocados. Esperanza's breath made smoky vapors in front of her face as she waited for the truck to take her to tight grapevines. She shifted from foot to foot and clapped her gloved hands together and wondered what was so new about the new year. It already seemed old, with the same routines.
Couple of things that I love. I love the fact that she says los aguacates because she's enunciating it the way it's supposed to be. So many times are we reading something, and I know that when I love reading I Am Malala, but when I'm reading I Am Malala, I'm like, oh my gosh, I really hope I'm enunciating this correctly, because that is not a language that I'm fluent in. Los aguacates wouldn't be a problem, but a great way for your children to hear what the words should sound like. You know, they're also able to visually follow along and see, oh, that's the word we're on, and that's the sentence that we're reading. As you also go through, you can hear in her voice, it already seems old with the same routines. You can get a feeling of what she may be feeling just by the sound of her voice and how she is stating something. And she does kind of sound like a young Hispanic girl. So there we double clicked again, got a definition. We can write a sentence on the definition. You can have your students email this, as you saw at the very end. Let me show you one more time. I will just skip ahead. So you can come to the end, hit the notes and bookmarks, and students will be able to show you, trying to get to it, there we go, all the words that they've highlighted and the definitions. I always talk about how hard we work as teachers. We hand the kids the list and we're like, okay, here's the list. This is the list about all the vocabulary words that you need to know. And the next day I come back to school and Jonathan is going, Miss, I lost that paper you gave me. Do you have another one? So we go through going through the chapters, creating our lists. Let's have the kids be part of that process. I would have our kids read chapter 1. I have my list of vocabulary words, but you have to make a list of 10 vocabulary words that you find interesting in chapter 1. So now we could put together possibly a list of 50 words that as a group we felt like were important in chapter 1. As a teacher, I'm also finding out what kind of background knowledge do my kids have, because I may think, yeah, of course, everybody knows what mesquite is, no, they might have thought it was mosquito instead of mesquite. So those are all the little things that you can learn when you have them do some of that. Let me exit out of here. So that was Esperanza Rising. Our books do have the visuals. So if you are reading a book for younger kids and it has pictures, you will see the PDF picture on there, as well as hear the voice as they're reading. And it does continue to track. that is my spiel for today. There is mpozo@learningally.org is how you would get a hold of me. Simone is S. Smith. We both work in tandem, so if you happen to not be in one of our districts, it's not a problem. We will go ahead and make sure that you're connected to the right person, and we will be able to support if the right person isn't available for you. Thank you, Liz, so much for having me here today, and I'll stay on. I'll just go off camera so Amanda can have her time.
Awesome. Thank you, Marta, for that wonderful presentation and all that information. I know I learned some things, so I'm sure other people are learning things too. So thank you. All right, Amanda, yeah, take it away.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for having me here today. It was wonderful to be able to listen to Marta speak about Learning Ally as well. I always think it's so wonderful at events like these to be able to hear about more than one tool for the toolkit for your students. And so I think it's great that we're able to both share information. You're able to see how Bookshare and Learning Ally can kind of fit into that toolkit that you're using for your students. So let me share my screen and we will get going over here as well. Please feel free to put any questions in the chat. I'll try to answer as we go. And then I also know that we have some time at the end here that we can take questions as well. I'm Amanda Landavaz. I'm a program manager with Bookshare. I've been with Bookshare for a little over 5 years now, and one of the fun parts of my job is getting to come and speak with educators like you all about Bookshare. Today, we would really like to talk about kind of quickly, what is Bookshare? I know not everyone here is familiar with Bookshare, so just want to take a look at what it looks like, what it is, who we serve, and then would like to take some time today to really take a look at what Bookshare looks like for a student and how you might get books to your students. So the main problem that we're all here working to solve is, like Liz said earlier, printed text doesn't work for all learners. We estimate that at least 5% of students experience a barrier to reading printed books, and they just need to consume content in different ways. You know, to fully participate in the classroom, in work someday, they really need access to the same materials as their peers at the same time. And while so many educators have taken really great strides in getting their curriculum in a digital format, as I'm sure this group well knows, digital just doesn't always equal accessible. I'm going to share a really quick video here, as long as this will play, that just kind of helps to briefly explain Bookshare. And if you've never seen it before, helps you kind of get a better idea as we're talking about Bookshare today, really what it is.
Inside every book is a new world, and nothing should keep you from exploring. Whether you're learning to read, studying for an exam, or just having fun, Bookshare helps you read in ways that work for you. Choose your favorite high-quality voice and listen to your books. Stay focused with karaoke-style text highlights. Adjust text to your perfect size, speed, color, and contrast. Choose from our huge collection of titles, ready to read on nearly any device. And the best part? It's free for U.S. students who qualify, and less than $1 a week for qualified adults. So start reading in ways that work for you and explore new worlds with Bookshare.
Perfect. So as we just saw, Bookshare in its simplest form is an ebook library. We are the world's largest accessible ebook library, and our goal is to make reading easier by letting students read in ways that work for them. So as you saw there, we have what we call the Bookshare Reader, where you can follow along with text to speech and that karaoke style highlighted text. Students can listen to books, they can read in large type, or as Liz alluded to earlier, you can read in Braille or on accessible devices as well. Like it mentions here, for students that qualify for Bookshare, and we've talked about it, we're going to talk about it a little bit again, Bookshare is a completely free service as long as they remain a U.S. student. So that's true when they graduate, high school and head to college, if they move out of Florida, if they become a homeschool student, or maybe they're attending a more alternative school in your area, Bookshare remains free as long as they are a student. That's also true if your students, maybe they move on to a vocational program instead of college or continuing ed program. As long as they're a student in some capacity, Bookshare is free. There are currently over 1 million titles in the Bookshare collection, which can be a little overwhelming as you're going through and looking for books. We're able to offer such a huge selection of books by using automated text-to-speech. We do now have a small collection of titles that are human narrated audio. I think it's around like 10 to 15,000 at this point. But the vast majority of the library is accessed using automated text-to-speech. And we're going to look at a couple books later, and you'll be able to hear that and see that for yourselves. So these books include everything from textbooks, leveled readers that a student may need for school, maybe books by Lexile level. But it also includes New York Times bestsellers, Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, books for upskilling. We even have things like the driver's license test manual for all 50 states. So really, whatever you might be looking for probably is in the Bookshare collection. Like Liz talked about earlier, though, if we don't have a book that a student needs for school, that book can be requested and we will add it to the library. We already touched on this, so I don't want to get too far into the weeds again, but the earlier you can request those books, the better, because we are manually chopping, scanning, proofreading those books to add them to the Bookshare collection. To be clear, like we have talked about already, students have to qualify for that free Bookshare membership. And I want to touch on this just a little bit because this is so many of the questions that we get when we're talking about this with educators. Qualified students generally fall into 3 categories. To qualify, your interaction with traditional print is impacted by a visual impairment, a learning disability, or a physical disability. And the way I like to picture this, or the way I often describe it, is if you're thinking about a student reading a traditional printed book, can your student see the printed words on the page? Can they decode those printed words? And can they physically hold that book or turn the pages? And if the answer to any of those questions is no, then they probably qualify for Bookshare. And I do want to make clear as well that the qualifications are the exact same for Bookshare or for Learning Ally. And we actually have a reciprocal agreement with Learning Ally. So if you already have students that are signed up for Learning Ally, they qualify for Bookshare, and vice versa. If you already have students that are signed up for Bookshare, they would qualify for Learning Ally as well. Another point of clarification, and Liz talked about this earlier as well, that while many or even most of your students probably will have an IEP or a 504, those are not requirements for a Bookshare membership. Although that IEP piece does grant them access to those NIMAC sourced books, the vast majority of the collection will be available to all students. And just wanted to mention here, kind of talking about the scope of students that may be eligible. As Liz said, I know that we have a lot of educators here today working with students with visual impairments. That may not be everyone here. And so I just want to call some attention to these numbers, that 5% number that I mentioned earlier, that at least 5% of students would qualify for Bookshare and Learning Ally. That's over 140,000 students in Florida. Currently, less than 20,000 students have a Bookshare membership. So I would just always say, encourage you to think about the students you're working with, those qualifications that we just discussed, and see if there might be eligible students that you see that would benefit from this access. Like Marta mentioned earlier, we're just trying to get books to kids. And if they qualify for Bookshare and Learning Ally, we want them to have that access so that they can be accessing books, that they can be accessing content at the same time as their peers, both for school and for that social emotional learning piece as well. Like Marta said, being able to talk to another student on your walk to lunch about the book you're reading, or participate in a book club at school that maybe you wouldn't be able to otherwise. Just checking in the chat real fast to see if any questions have come up. Perfect. Okay, so we touched on this a little bit through a variety of apps and reading devices. The Bookshare collection is available on a huge array of different devices. It's available on cell phones and tablets, both iPhone and Android, laptops, Chromebooks, Braille devices, now even smart speakers you can connect to your Bookshare account. So based on the device and the format that works best for your students, they can access these books through a lot of different ways. A lot of different formats here. Liz already talked about these, but we're really just highlighting here that however your student needs to access that book, we have a format that will work for them. Common and popular options include the Bookshare web reader, which is a reading platform created by us at Benetech. Students can access their books simply on their laptop, Chromebook, tablet, on their phone, and that's what we're going to look at later. But you're also able to download the formats that you would need for refreshable Braille display, Braille note taker, audio, if your student likes to use audio only as well. With Bookshare, students are able to have two different types of memberships, and we call those an organizational membership and an individual membership. And I do want to highlight the difference here because I think there can be a little bit of confusion around this and confusion around what students are able to access. So with an organizational membership, the Bookshare account is run by the school or the organization. Educators will add students to a roster, and then educators assign those students books. Students can only read the books that have been assigned to them. A student can log into Bookshare and search for a book. A book may pop up, but they have no access to that book unless an educator has assigned it to them. So, you know, I talk about it like they can walk into a library, see everything that's on the shelves, but they can't check everything out. So while we don't have some of the same filtering options, like Marta talked about with Learning Ally, a student cannot access a book that has not been assigned to them if they just have this organizational membership, which is the type that's run by a school. On the flip side of that, with an individual membership, a student can access the entire Bookshare library. They don't need a book to be assigned to them before they can read it. But an individual membership is run by a parent or guardian if the student is under the age of 18. They have to have parent permission to get that access. A parent is the one that signs them up. And that account is not run through the school. So as far as, you know, maybe limiting access or allowing parents to give a different level of access, a student can have both of these types of accounts, but at the school, you are limiting what you are giving access to for the student. Like I said, students can have both types of accounts. They are both free, so they can have an individual membership that they're using with their parents at home, the organizational membership where you, the educator, is assigning them books, and both of those are free for them. Once you have set up a Bookshare account as an educator, you can add any student that qualifies. You can actually add other educators in your school or district, so you can all be on one account together, assigning books to students. One thing to note is that within our system, at least right now, that educator level access is called a sponsor. So if you ever see that wording on the site, you're like, what's a sponsor? That's you. The educators that are running the accounts are the sponsor. I don't want to get too far into the weeds about account creation or management today, because I think it's really important to look at Bookshare and see how getting these books to students work. But know that there are links in the slides that Liz has sent out, as well as in some one-pagers that I provided as well, that kind of walk you through step by step. Here's how I set up an account. Here's how I add other educators. Here's how I add students to that account. Great. I'd like to spend the majority of the rest of our time here actually taking a look at Bookshare, but I'm going to pause here and see if there are any questions about what Bookshare is, who qualifies, what kind of access we're giving to students. Okay. Great. Let me reshare here. Actually, just take a look at what Bookshare looks like for a student. And thank you, Andrea. I see the vote of confidence in the chat there. We really appreciate it. So I am logged in as a demo student. This is a fake student where, you're not seeing any actual student information here. But this is what Bookshare looks like when a student logs into Bookshare. I'm on a laptop. This is their homepage. I'm on my Bookshare page. If this student scrolls down, she can see all of the books that she recently has read, as well as books that have been assigned to her. So going back to what we talked about earlier, only having access to books that have been assigned to you, this is the list of books that she can access. If she wants to read a book on her laptop, it would work very similarly if she was on a phone or if she was on a tablet. She finds the book she wants to read. We'll read Wonder today. She clicks Read Now, and that just opens right in that same browser. You'll see that this book opens in the middle of the book. That's because she's been in reading this book before. It's going to open up at the last place she was reading. And that is true across devices. So let's say she's reading on her Chromebook at school and goes home and logs into the same account on an iPhone. It's going to pick up at that same place that she left off. To start reading, she simply just presses the play button or can double click anywhere on the page for it to start reading, and it will go. I am wondering now if I did not share the sound, so I'm going to reshare this really quickly to make sure sound is shared. I always forget that with Zoom. Perfect. And let's try this again. We're just going to double click to start reading.
At least, we don't have to come like a character in a book anymore. In the lower school, that's what you had to do. Last year, I was the Wicked Witch of the West from The Wizard of Oz.
And you'll see it just starts reading. At the simplest form, this is what Bookshare is. A book has been assigned to this student. She clicks Read Now, it opens on that device, and she clicks to read. There are a lot of different customizations that we're going to poke into here that can really help improve the reading experience for your students. The first of those is voices. Like we said, the vast majority of the collection, the Bookshare collection, is read in text-to-speech, automated text-to-speech. And what the Bookshare reader uses are the voices that are built into the device that you're using. I'm on a PC reading with Microsoft Edge. There are going to be very specific voices that I can access here. If I open this exact same book using the Bookshare app on my phone, on an iOS device, there are going to be different voices available there. So I always say one of the first things a student should do is go into the settings up here in the top right and start customizing this experience so that it's the best version for them. We're going to start with audio. Like we said, there are lots of different voices to pick from. With Microsoft Edge, there are a ton of voices. I would say if you have access to Microsoft Edge, the accessibility built into this is really excellent. If your student's struggling with text-to-speech voices and they have access to Microsoft Edge, I would encourage them to go check out over there. But anyway, they can pick through here. They can try different voices. We'll try Anna. They can play a sample.
The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog.
Maybe they want a children's voice. Maybe they want a man's voice. Maybe they want a British voice. Lots of different options to pick from here. They can change the audio speed. I know, especially with students with visual impairments, they often like to listen to their books much faster than I do. So here is where they can access different audio speed. Some voicing options here. With the text, they can change the text size. So maybe your student just needs large text. Here's where they can adjust that. And you can see behind the screen here, it shows you what you're changing. So you kind of have an idea of what settings are happening. You can change the font size. We have 10 or 12 different fonts. Open Dyslexic is a really popular one for our students with dyslexia. They can choose that here. Things like character spacing. Lots of other settings to choose from. The page ones aren't as exciting for kids, but there are things here that can really help. Maybe they want one column of scrolling text instead of paginated. Maybe they need bigger line spacing. You can display page numbers here. And then the big one, like Learning Ally, Marta walked through, you can change all the colors that are available here as well. So if you want a different background color, text color, this is going to make all of our heads hurt a little bit, but sentence highlight, you can see there are dozens of different colors that you can be choosing from here. And so a student can walk through and really customize this how they would like. I'm going to change this back so we don't hurt ourselves. With the Bookshare reader, there are also some features that can help within the classroom as well. So one, you can navigate by chapter, by location here. So if they're wanting to move around the book, say in a classroom or at home, if they'd like to move around, they have book navigation here. You also have bookmarking capabilities. So if they're wanting to highlight a passage to come back to later, maybe they're filling out a worksheet or they're writing a paper and they want to bookmark some content to come back to, they have the bookmarking option down here, where they then, if we go back into that navigation, we can go into bookmarks and you can see all of the passages that I've bookmarked and can move around by those as well. So very simply, that's the Bookshare Reader. This version of the Bookshare Reader, we call it Bookshare Reader for Web. This is what's available on computers if you're logging in through a browser. We also have a Bookshare Reader for mobile, which is a free app. Again, no cost for the app. You download it to your mobile device or a tablet. The iOS version you can download, say, on an iPad, and you can access. It's very, very close to the same reading experience, same features, same customization, just on your phone instead. So if a student, like we said, wants to read on their phone at home, Chromebook at school, they're able to do that. With the mobile app version, you also can download for offline reading as well. So if you want to access, say, a kid wants to download a book because they're going on a road trip and they want to be able to read in the car, they won't have service, they can download the book and it'll work. The functionality works the same way when they're reading offline as well. Any questions or anything that you all would want me to poke into here? Yeah, Sherry, so the Bookshare app is new. We launched a Bookshare app at the end of I keep saying last year, but we're now into 2024. At the end of 2022, the Bookshare app was launched. And we are always working to bring that Bookshare app kind of up to parity with the web version as well. One really interesting thing that's actually launched first with the Bookshare app, as opposed to the browser version, is that the interface on the mobile app, you now can access in either English or Spanish. So this can be helpful at home. Maybe if parents are more comfortable in Spanish on the app, You can read, the interface itself. So the instructions, as you're navigating through the app, you can switch that over to Spanish. That is upcoming for the web version, but that has already launched for the app version. I want to look at a couple other pieces of functionality here with Bookshare, but please, as questions are coming up, pop them in the chat. I'm just going back to the My Bookshare page here. Janine, so we can use it on any device, iPad, tablet, etc. Yes, I would caveat that with almost any device. I know that unless you are very tech savvy with some workarounds that I don't fully understand, like opening on a Kindle isn't a very easy process unless you have a Kindle Fire where you're using the browser version. But generally speaking, any computer, whether that's PC or Mac, any phone, whether that's Android or Apple, tablets, but you would have Bookshare access. Essentially anywhere you can log into a browser, you can log into bookshare.org and open books. And then on any phone, you can download the app to access. I do want to take a look at some of our resources that aren't in English. I know a lot of you are working with students that maybe are English language learners, or maybe just for fun want to be reading in other languages. In Bookshare, we have over 50 books in over 50 different languages. The second largest collection of books by far is Spanish. I want to say we're at something like 60 or 70,000 books in Spanish at this point, although I would need to fact check myself on that. But there is some functionality with books in other languages that I want to touch on really quickly that can make a huge difference for the reading experience. So here we can see that Paige was recently reading Harry Potter in Spanish. So I'm going to open that back up. And this is actually something that Marta was talking about earlier, that when you're reading a book in a different language, you don't want my voice reading that book in a different language. So when you open a book back up in the Bookshare reader, it defaults to the last settings that you had set up. So here you can see the font size is the same as it was before. The spacing is the same. And I'm going to play this and you're going to hear that it's the same voice that we were using before as well. So let's hear what that sounds like.
Los dos días siguientes paran sin grandes incidents. A menos que así cuent como tal, el que Neville Dejara que así.
As you can hear, that's a horrible reading experience in Spanish. We would not want any of our students to read to that or to listen to that as they're reading a book in Spanish. So I just want to highlight that if you are ever assigning or if you're ever opening a book in a different language, always double check your settings. We'll go back into the settings up here. I'm actually going to slow my audio back down. And if we open voices again, you'll see here they're listed English. We were listening with Ava, an English voice, but there are now many Spanish language options also. And so we want to switch to a Spanish language voice. Let's try Ramona. And if we go back to the book and try again.
Los 2 días siguientes pasaron sin grandes incidentes, a menos que se cuente como tal el que Neville dejara que se fundiera su sexto caldero en clase de poción.
You can see that's a huge difference in the experience that someone would have reading this book in a different language. Again, the Bookshare reader just accesses the voices that are available on the device you're using. So I have this open in Microsoft Edge. Like I said earlier, I think their voices are the best. They also have the most voice options. If I were to open this in Google Chrome, there would be maybe 2 or 3 Spanish language options. Still great. We would definitely still want to switch over. I know Edge has Arabic voices you can use. It's not going to have every language built in, but it is always worth checking to see if there's a voice that better matches the experience of the book that you're reading. Any questions while we're still looking at the student side of this? Otherwise, I'm going to switch gears a little bit and show you what it looks like for the educator. And then I think my time is about up. Okay, great. Let me switch over really quickly. Just so you can see that experience of assigning books to your students. Great. So I'm logged in as a demo educator. This is what I'd see. The interface is very similar. These are recent books I've had open. You can see up here is where I would search for a book. We will search for Wonder again, since we had that one open. I will say, if you are looking for a book in Bookshare, I would always suggest searching by the ISBN. You're just going to get a much more specific search, especially if you're looking for something like a textbook where you have a very specific version of that book that you're looking for. So again, we've looked for Wonder, it's pulled up. All I need to do is click this Assign button. It's going to pull up the list of students that I've added to my Bookshare account. I can actually see which students I've already assigned this to, but maybe we also want Mark and Joe to be reading Wonder. I click Assign. Now, the next time Mark logs into Bookshare, he'll see Wonder in his list of assigned books with that blue Read Now button. Prior to this, if he were to log into Bookshare and look up Wonder, he would not have that blue Read Now button. It would just indicate to him that that book was not available to him. If you have a student that you want to read Wonder, but maybe the web reader isn't the best experience for them, maybe they want to read on their Braille Note Touch, maybe they want to read just the audio version, here's where we would download that version for them. Just in this same search, you click download. It's going to take you to your students again. You select which student, and then you select over here what download format you would like for them. So you can see here, I can download the BRF, I can download the audio. Maybe I want to download the Word version and upload it into their Google Classroom where they're accessing the rest of their assignments. All of those options are here. I then click Prepare Books, and this is just confirming I'm packaging this book for Paige. It's for a specific student. And this then will download, you'll see here when it's done, to my computer directly. And that's it. You then have the file. If we've assigned this book to Paige, she actually can download it on her end as well. So if she were to log in, she can download the BRF version. She can download the audio once it's been assigned to her. You'll see now available. When I click that, it's going to open the folder on my computer and I can access that audio version. The one last thing I'll touch on, and then Liz, I swear I'm done because I know I'm taking us so close to time, is that you also can assign multiple books at once via reading lists. And we'll take a very quick look here. I just went to our browse page and you'll see we have all of these reading lists created. Let's go into Lexile lists, where I can assign a whole list of books to a student at once. And here's where you would access these. You can also make your own lists. So Liz, I know I've taken us far too far. I'm so sorry. But a lot of this information is in all of the slides and everything that Liz will be sharing out as well.
No, thank you, Amanda. I'm completely fine with you taking that time because that was a lot of great information too. Again, things that I didn't know about Bookshare, and it's especially exciting hearing about all the new features that Bookshare and Learning Ally are releasing. I did have a question about that. One of those last things you were showing us. So let's say for a student, you pick your title and the format. Can you go back and pick another format so the student could do like audio and Word or whatever?
Yep. Absolutely. Okay. You're able to download as many times, as many formats. And there isn't any sort of like limited access to a book either. If you assign a book to a student, they don't have it for X amount of time. They have it forever, as long as they have their Bookshare account. It's not like a library where it might time out or something like that.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. All right, I'm just gonna bring up our closing slides here. So we do have, like I mentioned, a very brief evaluation that really helps us with our getting feedback from you all to make sure that we're providing meaningful training to you, and it helps us plan for next year, incorporate your feedback into future trainings. So there is a QR code on the screen, and if I can have one of my FIMC people put the link to that form in the chat as well, that would be great. And while you're grabbing that QR code, I'm just going to look in the chat. So Andrea said if you're using Bookshare on the Chameleon or the Mantis, those are both refreshable Braille displays. You have to make sure BRF is the student preferred format. So pro tip for you there. And then Amanda did share. Amanda, I think that just went to the host and the panelist. I'm going to copy that and make
Yep.
sure everyone has that. There we go.
You even said at the beginning, make sure you don't do that.
I know it's tricky. It's a tricky thing. So there is a survey here that Amanda would love for you to fill out on behalf of Bookshare. They're also looking for feedback as well. And we have Marta's email address in the chat, mpozo@learningally.org. And all of their contact information is in the slide deck that I shared. I'm going to just put that link back in the chat so you guys have that as well. And then if you are looking for in-service and or ACV REP credit, your closing code that you want to take note of is literacy. And so what you're going to do is you're going to scan that QR code on the right side of the screen that's showing right now for in-service credit. And we'll get a link in the chat for that too, but you're going to fill it out, put in your email address, make sure that's correct, and your name and all of that good stuff. And then a certificate will be emailed to you. So I'm going to leave this here for a moment so you guys can grab all of your QR codes so you can fill these things out. These forms, just if you, for whatever reason after this, you lose this or you forget, both of them are on the forms page of our website, on the upcoming events page of our website, and the past events page of our website. So we try to cover all of our bases with that. So, and I put our website in the chat, and we will be posting this recording within a week on that past event page of our website. And I'm just going to move on to our last slide here. This is my contact information, eAnderson@FIMC-VI.org. I do want to thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. Marta, Amanda, thank you both so much for taking time out of your day and sharing all of this wonderful information with our folks here in Florida. I'm really hoping that people share this when you see that recording. Share this with your colleagues, share this with everyone that you're working with, so we can get more students using these platforms. Because as we saw, Amanda was saying, we are only a fraction of the students that should be using Bookshare are on there. And I'm sure the same is true for Learning Ally. So whatever we can do to get more students getting access to books and reading and literacy, the better. So thank you both so much. It was wonderful doing this presentation with you. I appreciate you both. I'm going to go ahead and stop my recording.
Thanks for having us. This was wonderful.